Welcome back to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. And on today's episode, I interview the corporate action hero, John Davis. Now sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce John Davis, you guys are going to love his story. It's wild. I've never had anybody like this on my show with this kind of a story who's got this background and the career path he chose in spite of his major trauma in his life is crazy. So before we talk to John, I want to tell everybody where they can hear the podcast. Pretty much anywhere you listen to audio podcasts, Pandora, iHeart, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it, it's everywhere. All I ask is that you hit the subscribe button and then also the automatic download button. It just helps me with my metrics and making sure that I am pacing where I believe I should be with the show. If you want to learn more about me personally and my career and the things I've done in my life, or to learn about the book I wrote, A Brother's Love and Memoir, which I wrote 15 years ago. It's a tribute to my brother Andy, who was autistic and had a severe stutter and sadly died in a car accident in 1989, and it's our life story together and the greatest tribute and honor of my life to be able to share our story with all of you. And after 15 years, it's still going strong. So you can order A Brother's Love and Memoir there on the website, mattcubbler.com, or you can order on Amazon or anywhere else books are sold online. You can also find my YouTube channel, Matt Cubbler. All I ask is that you also hit the subscribe button and that little bell thingy jiggy to get the notifications. So we can learn more about me. Without further ado, John Davis, how are you, bud?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Matt. Really happy to be here, and thank you for the work that you've done in your past. It's important work that you've done.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. Well, John is, we'd never met. We were matched through a podcast matching service. Actually, a guest of mine, former guest of mine, actually created, and pretty cool little thing that he has there with matches hosts with guests, and it's pretty neat. And I've got a couple lined up from that. So it was a pretty neat service. John,
you're my 61st in 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah. off of that service, pod match. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's a great idea, great concept, and it works. Apparently the type of people that it's getting as far as guests that I'm able to get from it are pretty impressive. John is living in Akron, Ohio, and is originally from Dover, Delaware. Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump south of where I'm at, outside of Philadelphia. So it's cool to have somebody from the East Coast also on the show today.
Yeah, I heard that Philly accent. I felt like I was back home. I was like, there you go. Made me kind of homesick, actually.
It's you don't know you have an accent until you hear from someone else.
It's so true. It's so true. And I got out here and I thought I had the actor's accent, the Nebraska clean accent that you're supposed to have as an actor. And these Ohioans are all saying, where are you from? You sound funny. And I was like, I must have the East Coast accent. You know what I mean?
Well, John, I asked one question, and my show has zero format, no plan. I did very little research. The research I did was about 20, 30 seconds worth of conversation we did before I hit record. Because I like it to be fresh for me. Like, I don't want to have a plan in my head and then have the conversation lead a different direction and have no idea, because I already have this preconceived direction I wanted to go in. I like everything to be sort of authentic and new and fresh for not only my listeners, but also for me. So I asked one question, and that question is the same for everybody. Who is John Davis?
Who is John Davis? John Davis is now 57 years old, but when he was a young man, he wanted to be a stuntman, a fight director, and was working his way there, and went to a Renaissance festival one time and ended up meeting two of the top fight directors in the country, who ended up giving me their training for free. And I was really getting excited because now I was working into being a stuntman and the fight director. And then one day a buddy of mine asked me to help him unload his van from boxes of clay, and picked up the first box of clay and turned around, and my spine split in two. And they took me to the hospital. The doctor said, Mr. Davis, you have a condition known as spina bifida occulta, to which I promptly said, Gesundheit. because I had no idea what the hell that was. All right. And I said, okay. He said, well, he says, 3 of your vertebrae never formed properly at birth. And because of that, what happened with the extra weight and the twisting action, you basically unscrew the top half of your spine from the lower half of your spine, and you pinched off your spinal column. They said, you're probably never going to walk again. And you definitely, if you are able to walk again, you will definitely never have a physical career. You'll never be a stuntman. You'll never be a fight director. You'll never do all your dreams. And while I was lying in that hospital bed, a friend of mine gave me something that, when you look back at it, really looks like a cruel joke. He gave me a book by Bruce Lee called The Tao Jeet Kune Do. So he gave me gave the martial arts guy, who was just told he'd never do martial arts again, a book by the greatest martial artist in the world, right? About martial arts. So totally one of the biggest, mean jokes.
I'd hate to see what your enemies look like.
Right. But that was absolutely the greatest thing that could have happened to me, because I'm reading that book. And later on, I found out that when Bruce wrote that book, he was lying in a bed in traction and was just told he'd never do martial arts again. And he wrote that book while he was in traction. And so I'm reading that book, and I tapped into this thing about mental flexibility and staying very present, making your present moment successful. And I started just saying, okay, I could take what that doctor believes about my future, or I could take what I believe about my future. And I just started changing. I said, I'm going to be a stuntman, no matter what he says. And so I started on day one, I just started flexing my upper back muscles. Slowly but surely, I flexed the muscles down the back till one day I flexed my hip muscles, and the doctors were blown away. By day 30, I was sitting on the edge of a bed. At a year, I was walking around like a normal guy, but I was not back to my buff, rock hard, masculine self like I was before. And then at a year and 6 months, I climbed up on a 3-story tower and I jumped off into a fall pad. I then went on to do over 4,000 live comedy sword fighting shows under the name Hack and Slash all over the world, including the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan on 6 USO tours. And then I found myself really enjoying those shows, but I was liking the time after the show more, because I discovered that my process of getting out of that bed, I learned how to shorten learning curves and achieve more really quickly, and how to control my mindset. And I was discovering that I was sitting in the audience helping people find their own power, their own inner power. And I said, I got to find a way to mix what I do. Do I still do my show, or do I do this coaching stuff? So I created this thing called the Corporate Action Hero. And now what I do is I go out and I do motivational keynote speeches, and I use whips and nunchucks in the speeches, and it's really fun, a lot of humor. And as I was saying before the show, one of the things that I end that program with is I choose the most timid person I can find in the audience. I bring them to the stage, and in under 5 minutes time, they learn to crack a whip and take targets out of my hand. And now that's what I've been doing ever since. I travel the world doing corporate speeches, and that is my career now. That's what I do.
It's fascinating. I mean, I told you before the show that I used to own a fitness / neuromuscular rehab facility based off of technology that I co-patented, that allows us to do certain things to the human body that forces eccentric loads and a lot of neural priming going on and things like that. And it's really beneficial for people with neuromuscular neurological issues. So I can truly understand the recovery component from such a traumatic injury, and how easily and quickly those things happen trauma-wise, but then also the limitations on recovery typically begins and ends with the person who is recovering.
Right.
And it's that, I have several friends who have gone from completely paralyzed with 100% no way you're ever walking again to walking. And it's through my business partner, Mike Borowitz, who taught me everything I know. And he was up in University of Michigan. And Brock Mueller, who you may have heard that name, his brother played at Michigan. He lived in Oswego, Ohio.
Oswego is how we say it. Yeah.
Yep. And on Christmas Eve 2008, I'm going to say, his family was T-boned and his father was killed, his brother's girlfriend was killed, and Brock was paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
And Brock now walks. He has arm canes, but he still, I mean, he moves his legs, walks. He did a mile walk. He's just an amazing testament to not only hard work and perseverance, and having someone like Mike Barwis who understands how to manipulate the human body in a way that isn't traditional, but also a faith in God and a belief in a higher power, that if you put all your energy and effort and then your faith in something of a higher power, something bigger than you, that you have a chance of truly becoming anything that you set your mind to.
Right. Well, it's funny you say that. I was raised Catholic, and we were so Catholic. My mom had her master's degree in liturgy, and and
That's
she
all in right there.
Oh man, all in. And she was head of liturgical doctrine in our church, which meant that when the priest did a sermon, he had to actually pass it by my mom before he did it to make sure it matched doctrine, right? But when I turned 18, my mom said to me, she said, John, spirituality is a personal journey, and it's not right for someone to dictate what you believe. You need to actually find what you believe. This is what I believe. If it works for you, great. If not. So I went off and I studied Buddhism, Hinduism, the Baha'i faith, the teachings of Swaminarayan, and just on and on and on and on and on. And I found universal truths in all of it. And I found these incredible thought processes, and during that time of coming back from my injury, I really leaned into some of that. For instance, Buddha says, what you think you become, you create your world. Gandhi says, you must be the change you want to see in this world. Krishna said, you're the culmination of your thought. And Jesus said, whatever you ask in God's name is granted. But Moses, when he climbed the mountain, found out that God's name was I am. And so anything you put after the word I am is what you're creating to experience. Now, I could have easily said, I am paralyzed, or I am done with my career. Instead, I was like, I am becoming a stuntman. I am flexing my muscles today. I am getting out of this bed and moving on and doing what I want to do with my life. And by seeing the results of that, trust is developed by results over time. And so I watched my results over time start achieving amazing things. And so ever since then, it was like I left that bed. And like I said, I went off, I did over 4,000 comedy sword fighting stunt shows. I also became a college professor, an artistic director of regional theme parks. What else did I do? Now I'm a keynote speaker. Like I said, I travel all over doing that. Those comedy stunt shows, like I said, took me to the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan. We did 6 tours from 2001 to 2006. But anything I've ever wanted to do, I've just known that I could now because, I create my world. And I believe absolutely in, they call it the God of Spinoza. Einstein said he believes in the God of Spinoza, rather than a physical deity. It's the energy of all, basically. And so I look at all this energy that we live in as the manipulating force, and I'm just a consciousness within that force. And so if that's the truth, then when you really dive into it, like you ever heard about noetic science?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Edgar Mitchell, some of those studies right now, they're showing that they can measure thought. They can literally measure thought waves. They also, right now, they're doing a study that says if they focus that thought in a particular point in space, that the thought waves don't pass that point. And there's something happening there. They don't know what it is yet. They're trying to figure out what it is, but there is an actual thing that's happening at that point. So that event, that energy event that's happening at that point, is being created by that thought. So you literally are scientifically creating from thought, which is
I've been all in on 5D consciousness for the last year, and just trying to understand as much as I can about quantum physics and how that relates and correlates with my faith and my beliefs in Jesus, and where does it all fit in, and it's actually fits perfectly. Like everything I believe about God and my faith and Christianity and eternal life, if you believe God created the heavens and the earth, and you believe that everything is reduced down to the individual cell, the individual atom, and the individual nucleus, and that energy within everything, every single thing in the world, that how could energy not
Right. And if everything, as Einstein said, if everything you see is energy, including the air, then you are literally in God's image.
Exactly.
You are inside of God's image. So, this hand that you hold in front of your face is part of that energy. So, your consciousness is within the consciousness of a larger source, and you work together. The toughest part that people have, I find, is that, he said, whatever you ask in God's name, you will receive if you have faith. But the interesting thing is what you put faith in can be positive or negative. He didn't promise anything. He didn't say
Right.
it's all gonna be positive. He says, you focus on negative and you put that thought out, I'm going to show you negative. So a lot of people get stuck in this idea of, God, it's such a terrible world and so on and so forth. Well, God's going to say, okay, here's some terrible for you. Right. It's just the way it works. You have, I to break it down out of spirituality and into a real basic sense, basically God is unlimited supply and you ask to receive. And so, and in
And he's
that
unlimited
regard
supply of everything.
of everything,
He's got anything.
everything in your life,
Everything you could ever
anything,
want,
right?
he has unlimited supply of. Right.
Absolutely. In fact, I said that line, whatever you ask in God's name is granted. That's not the important line. It's the next line that's the most important. And it's nothing will be impossible for you. Nothing is impossible for you. And for me, I had just been told you're done. You'll never be a stuntman. You'll never be a fight director. You'll never do these things. Now I could take that belief and that focus and I create that into my life. Absolutely. If I focused and went that way, that's what would have happened. But instead I chose a different path and I chose to put my faith elsewhere. And I was shown something else. I mean, I've worked in movies with Brad Pitt, David Duchovny. I've done amazing things in my life, and it's all because I know that I can.
I think it's, one of the things I've learned in my life, and I wasn't always an enlightened person. I wasn't always the most positive or the best choice maker or any of those things. And I lived a very eventful life and a very good life and a very servant life, but it wasn't always with full thought and consciousness or with the purest of heart or with any emotional connection for that matter. I had a 13-year period after my brother died where I was in a deep depression and I didn't really I accomplished physically some things, but none of it meant anything to me.
Right.
And wasn't until I realized that the greatest gift that was given to me, which was also the greatest trauma that ever happened to me, was my brother dying. And if it wasn't for his death, I would have never reached my potential as a person, as a contributor on this earth to making the world a better place. I would have continued because I knew who I was before he died. I was a smoke and mirrors guy. I was anything I could do to just go around the system, I figured it out. I was very intelligent, but I certainly wasn't a hard worker. And one of the things I think that limits people's beliefs in what is possible is the fact that they've never truly been tested or challenged to do their very best at anything. And I can honestly say I did my very best one time in my life when it was a full encapsulating mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, combined all those things. I did my very best at each one of those things. And I ran across the state of New Jersey, and I have rheumatoid arthritis and arthritis throughout my body, and I'm not supposed to be running. And I manifested in this image of what running 78.8 miles would be.
Right.
Having never run more than 10 miles at one time. And that was when I was younger and in the military. And at this point in time, I wasn't able to run more than 20, 24 miles in a week during my training. And I figured out the odds of, successful completion of a run across New Jersey. And the first thing I did was I put a hard end time and I made it an event.
Okay.
So once I knew that there was going to be a couple hundred people there, that if I didn't show up at that time, shit was going to go sideways.
Right.
So I made that component. And then I also left zero plan B. So it was either me running or not at all.
Right. You burned your ships.
Yeah. And it was, I broke 6 bones in my feet. I had a full body seizure at mile 40. Lots of things happened to me along that run, emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally. I got done. I had to give a speech. I got about halfway through it and just physically and emotionally just couldn't speak anymore. My wife had to finish it for me.
Mm,
I knew that day that I'd never done that in my life. I've never really invested that much in my life, and I never truly bet on myself that heavily.
right, right,
And
right.
when I was asinine to think that I could run across the state of New Jersey, but I trusted in my own intestinal fortitude that I could do anything once,
Right, right,
and I forced myself to do anything once.
right.
I think
But
that's
you
where, for
and you
me,
did it.
yeah, and I forced myself into that manifestation that I have to believe in this or else I'm screwed.
Right,
This I don't want to be the guy that didn't come through or didn't achieve the thing I'd been, I'd raised 25,000 for charity. Like this was a whole big thing. I mean, I was on all over the news in Philadelphia. Like it was a big deal.
right,
And if I hadn't finished, I'd been that guy. Right.
right, right. Absolutely.
So I think one of the things, and probably you can speak heavily to it, is when you're forced with the impossible, when people say it can't be done, when people say you shouldn't do it, or there's no way that can be accomplished, you hit like that crossroads. Like there's this moment, this seminal moment where you go, I'm either all in or I quit.
Right.
And it's what was that like when you were laying in that bed and you started reading that book? Was there like a defining moment, like at that very moment you knew
I
you were going to
I
do that?
knew I knew, and it was very interesting because I remember reading that mental flexibility and about being like water and like flowing around any obstacle that came around me. And I suddenly realized that the doctor was the obstacle, and that was the obstacle. And it was really interesting because it came to a point where it was like, well, that's just a level of belief he's trying to give me. And so my job is to live my life, not to live his expectations. And so I had to literally think of the doctor doctor as the obstacle and break past it. And it was interesting because when I flexed my hips that first day, that the day that they flexed, he was blown away. He didn't think it was going to happen. He never thought that I'd be I don't know if he thought I'd ever walk again, but he told me I probably wouldn't. But I don't know if he believed I could get myself to flex my hips in under a month. That was pretty impressive for him. And I just kept saying, I don't live their life, I live mine. And so and that's the way I live my life now too. This whole process gave me this whole thing of, and that, I'm sorry, that process of me getting out of that bed and seeing soldiers on the front lines and seeing stunt personnel, men and women, doing amazing, crazy things with their body and talking to them all about how they do those things. It made me formulate what I now call the 5 Fs. And it's a process of hacking the fight or flight response
Mhm.
to shorten learning curves and achieve more. And it was really one of those situations where I realized that all of the obstacles that I was coming up against were, you know, were probably like the doctor was probably being a very caring individual. He was probably saying to me, you never do this, so that I could brace for the fact that I probably wasn't going to do that, right? Because that's what he usually sees. But I realized that even any obstacle you come to, it's not about the obstacle, it's about your fear response to that obstacle. And Buddha says the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. You know, and so when I look at how do you eradicate fear, there's actually simple processes for breaking out of the primal response. And if you can start to work your way through the what I call the 5 Fs, so fearlessly focus with faith, follow through with flexibility. If you can work your way through that process and constantly address the fear process, your obstacles seem much less large because it's the fear that's giving you the enormity of it. Because you're thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Well, oh my God, is you just being scared.
Right.
Right. And I decided I'm not going to be afraid anymore. And that's huge for a lot of people who live their life under the subconscious beliefs of others. Parents who abused, or friends who I think one of the most damaging things that friends can do to you is lean into sarcasm, because the people who who might have, emotional trauma from parents or whatever, they bottle that sarcasm as really hurtful stuff. And so I think it's really kind of an interesting thing that, that fear response is the biggest limiter of all of us.
I think, and I lived the last 32 years in a world where, I'm running into dangerous places and doing dangerous things. And, there's plenty of science behind um, why do some people make the right decisions. And I'll use law enforcement as an example. There's been plenty of examples in the last 5, 6 years where officers have made incorrect decisions in a very chaotic and hectic moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a TED talk audition theme with chaos, and I talked about the chaos that goes through a police officer's mind when they're in a lethal force situation, and understanding, the fact that we're in one of the very few non-military professions, probably the only, I would argue, where you're not allowed to listen to your primal instinct, right? You have to go against the very thing that keeps you alive in most typical scenarios. And understanding how, like you're talking about with your 5Fs, we have the OODA loop, and understanding how you process information under extreme high stress situations usually dictates the outcome for not only your life, but other people's lives.
Right. And when I was in Iraq, I asked the soldiers, I said, when you go into a situation where you might get shot at or get bombs blown up, what's the first thing you do before you go in? And they say, well, first of all, we have to exhale. And, and it's interesting because when you look at the exhale, it's the same thing actors do on stage. If they forget all their lines on stage, they're trained to exhale and relax all their muscles. Well, if you dive deeper into the physiology of that shuts off the primal response, because when you're in a fear state, you feel like you can't breathe, not because you don't have air, but because your body's conserving air so you can run further and faster.
Exactly.
Right. So when you exhale, it shuts off that response and turns on your cognitive brain again. Right. And so they were doing that. And then the second one was, they said, well, we can compartmentalize the fear because of the fact that we also have an objective, something to focus on that's outside of their fear. And by having the objective and the exhalation and the releasing of that tension, they can get the job done. I'm sure as a police officer, you probably have the same sort of experience.
Yeah, the exhaling is, we don't necessarily say exhale, we verbalize. So we do a lot of talking,
okay,
which forces your body to just naturally go through its breathing process so that you're able to get the words out and say what you need to say. I was SWAT for 12 years, so every time we would hit a house, we're screaming things that there may not be anybody in the room.
Right.
We're saying all those things because it forces us to get out of the tunnel vision, breathe, start to regulate all of the necessary functions that we need to be able to make smart decisions so we get clarity. I also have learned that, through training and mental conditioning and visualization, that part of my success story in high pressure life or death situations has always been about I try my best to put myself mentally in those positions and work through problems so that as many times as I possibly can, with every potential outcome, 2 guys in the room, 3 guys in the room, how many rooms, pulls a gun, what am I looking at? Am I in a square room, in a rectangle room? Like, I work through all these potential scenarios in my brain, not for any other reason other than if I happen to get into another situation again. And all of these mental exercises that I do, and I'll work through just sitting still in my police car, working through drawing my weapon, presenting my weapon, scanning the room. What is my visual perception with my peripheral vision? Like, what am I seeing? Like, in my head, I go through all those exercises, and it actually helps me. And I check my heart rate while I'm doing these visualization exercises, and I'll notice that it goes up in the very beginning, and then starts to lower and reduce itself and plateau as I'm working through the problem. And having been in combat as well in the military, those are the things, I always, when people ask me when I go through a door, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about all of the bad guys that are in there and what they can do to me.
Right.
Because that forces me, as I'm going in, to not be shocked by what I see.
Right. Right.
When you in SWAT, especially, or even in military and urban warfare, when you're searching buildings and stuff like that, like they do in the Middle East, looking for um, Al Qaeda or ISIS fighters who might be holed up in a compound or whatever. You go through those drills, like we would map out with tape the floor plan of a house, and everybody goes through their role and does it 2 dozen times, 3 dozen times an hour before we go hit the house.
Hmm.
They do that. The SEALs, if you ever watch any videos of the SEALs and their training, they're constantly training on mock-up
Right.
compounds, right?
They're making their plan habitual.
Right, and the scenario that they'll throw in, like the number of people, is always 100 times worse
Mhm.
than what you're ever going to find. Like when I was an air marshal after 9/11, one of the first people hired after the tragedy, and we had like mock-up airplanes, and we would just a couple air marshals on a flight, and it's all of a sudden 10 terrorists are on this plane, and it's
Right.
me, my partner, and maybe another guy, and we have to do our job as if we're on the airplane that's in flight, and then take care of business against 10, 12 terrorists on a plane
Right.
with a bunch of people panicking.
Right.
It's they have strobe lights and smoke and music blaring, and it's everything they can do to create an auditory exclusion event, so that you lose some of your senses, because it's just too much. But then they'll ask you on our debrief, right, what song was played, um, what were the color of the strobe lights, like things like that, to see whether or not, on top of what you were tasked to do on the plane, business wise, that you were paying attention to, that you weren't shutting out other senses.
Right. Right. That's amazing. That's a amazing training, actually.
It's changed. Being in my career has afforded me the ability, and that clearly trauma gets compartmentalized in on the job. I've seen too many dead people, and you
Right.
compartmentalize that. And but when it comes to training, when it comes to understanding how you're going to perform in the most ungodly situations, that's a appreciating skill set if you're not constantly working at it.
Right. Right. Same thing with stunt work. If you're not constantly training, that's why, like in the Society of American Fight Directors, you get certified every 3 years because you're constantly. It's a perishable skill, and
Exactly.
as with any of those sort of combat styles, um, people often ask me about my getting my black belt. And I kind of cringe at it now because it's been so long since I've been really training. I don't really consider myself a black belt anymore because even though I got it, I consider mastery an ongoing thing. It's like somebody says they're a master of something, and then they stop training, or they stop adding to the skill that they've mastered, because the skill is going to surpass them at some point, because
Yep.
people are going to start improvising and creating new around that same skill set, and whoever's coming up behind them is going to know this new stuff that they don't know. And so your job as a master is to continue. I do still do nunchucks in my speeches, and I go out back on my back deck and I train for hours and just doing dumb stuff just to see what I can figure out, because I also do really flashy showman stuff. And so, like, I do stuff now where I throw it around my neck and let it slide down my arm, and I bring it out of that onto my foot, and I bring it back up. And it's all stuff that I improvised at one point. But if I didn't do that, I would just be the guy doing the over the arm, the basic, flick it out a little bit. Now I'm doing all kinds of crazy spinning and twirling because I continued my action. It's the same thing with bullwhips. If you're not constantly cracking bullwhips and learning the finesses of it, then you're not going to get the next crack that somebody else has already gotten, right? So you're constantly training those perishable skills. And I don't do high falls anymore. I'm 57 years old and I don't really need to, right? nor do I really want to.
Let me ask
but
you this question.
but Good. Go
I,
ahead.
I'm dying to know, because I know we're just talking about fear and how paralyzing
Mhm.
the fear can be, and we're talking about all the mental training you did, reading the Bruce Lee book, and healing your body through your own uh, belief and knowledge that it's going to happen. When you had to do that first, you said 18 months after the injury, you did your first high fall. I guess is that what you're calling it, a high fall?
High fall, yeah, yeah.
And I don't know the parameters by which what that looks like. I'm only assuming you're high in the air and you land into a giant big pillow. But
I was 3 stories in the air. So I was
you're on the
imagine
edge
jumping over
of a building.
yeah. Well, it was a tower built for high falls, but I was 3 stories in the air. And looking down at a pad, looking down at the pad that I swear to you looked a lot bigger when I was standing next to it.
Like a tic tac up there, right?
Right. When you're up top, you're looking down and you go, "Oh man, I hope I hit that."
Did you have that moment where you go, "Fuck, can I do this?"
I had that moment before I started climbing the tower, but once I made the commitment to climb the tower, it was done. And by the time I got to the top and I was getting ready to make that jump, and I had people, I built that tower. It was also, that tower was also designed to collapse. And so it was really an interesting tower. But when you're standing on top of that tower and you're looking down, you're like, at that point, I was really in what I would call celebration mode. I was like, damn right, I'm doing this. And to me, it was like, that was 18 months of the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And this is the celebration of it, because this is the proof that I am going to be all right and do the things that I want to do with my life. And I jumped off and I came off and I jumped off 3 more times. Right. I was like so excited to do it. And after the third time, I was like, yeah, I'm a little sore. I'm going to take a break, because jumping into a pad is an interesting thing, because when you hit the pads are great. They're giant cushions. They have big air releases that come out of the side. They're foam, but they have layers that are open. So when you hit, they blow air out the sides. And when you hit that, it arches your body in a very specific way. And it was arching my body in ways that my body hadn't done in a while. And so it was like, not my back, but other parts of my body were really starting to ache because I was doing it. But I would do it again right now if I was younger.
When you that was the step one, right, of your journey to becoming a stuntman again, and doing all those things that you ended up doing in your career, 4,000 comedy sword fighting acts, 6 tours with USO, all the stuff that you've accomplished. Was there a I'm a physical mess. Like, my joints, God didn't bless me with the greatest physical structure in my body. Granted me with enough to be dangerous with what I have, but not enough to be exceptional in anything. Was there a moment after you started back and you're now full-fledged, all in being a stuntman, did you have any injury that you said, "Oh shit, I think I might have, what if I re-aggravated what happened to me, or could this be something that ends my career?" Like, was there anything like that ever happened?
No, but I'll tell you what did happen. Overcompensation gave me injuries on the peripheral. Like, I was spraining and breaking ankles all the time. My knees were getting hurt all the time because I was cushioning around my back. So I would do things to protect my back. I would start to trip and I would take all the weight into my ankle, or something like that. So I had a lot of sprained ankles, a lot of broken ankles. By the end of my sword fighting career, our show was an Elizabethan themed. It was Sir Nigel Hackett / Montagne. And I was wearing thigh-high boots specifically so that I could wear knee and ankle braces inside those boots, right? Because I had to keep my those joints solid. But I'll tell you something really fascinating. And the next really physical thing that I had to use my principles on was about 3 years ago. I started getting ill, and I went to the doctors and they couldn't figure it out. What was wrong with me. And first they thought I had a blood clot in my leg, and then I didn't have that. Then they thought it was in my lung, and it wasn't that. Then they thought I had congestive heart failure, and it wasn't that. And it was just like thing after thing after thing after thing after thing. And then eventually one of the things they did find was sleep apnea. I had sleep apnea. But the more I never had high blood pressure my entire life. I had high blood pressure suddenly out of the blue and all these things. And the doctors were every time I'd go in, they'd tell me the next thing they thought it was, they'd give me another medication. So suddenly I was on like 7 or 8 medications for these imaginary diagnoses that they were giving me. And at some point I was sitting there and I was like, why am I giving my control of my health away? And I said, so let me really think about what's going on. And I started thinking about every time that I've had, the issues, it's been around, an abundance of carbohydrate consumption. And so I started studying low carbohydrate diets, right? And then I discovered, so I went on the ketogenic diet, lost a bunch of weight, was still having a lot of pain, was still having a lot of my issues. And then I ran into this thing called the carnivore diet. I don't know if you've heard about this at all. Basically, you eat meat and eggs and water or tea, coffee. And I went on that diet, and all the joint pain that I had that I thought was injuries from years of stunt work went away. Wow. Like in 3 weeks. The eczema I had on my face went away in 7 days. My eyes, which were brown, turned green. I lost 70 pounds in just shy of 2 months. My blood pressure went down to 120 by over 80 regularly. So it's very normal blood pressure. All of my health factors went to perfect. And I just wasn't consuming carbohydrates anymore. And I stopped taking all their medications. And so it was, once again, I had to come to that space of, I can't take what they're telling me is true. I'm not saying to anybody who's listening to this podcast, don't listen to your doctor, because that's not what this is about, but for me, the doctors were telling me these were these things that we think it is. Here's a medication for that thing that we think it is. And then they would never take me back off the medication. And so it's like, okay, you know that it's not that. So why am I still on this medication? Right. And they had me on seven different pills, and I don't take any pills at all right now. I feel great. My joints don't hurt. My skin is clear. My eyes are green still. I've reincorporated some greens, some vegetables back into my diet, but not a lot of more. I am still mainly carnivore, but with a little bit of keto in there. But I feel great now, and it was all me once again claiming my own path, as it were.
Yeah, it's so many times, and I wish I had the want, I guess, is actually probably what it is more than anything else. The want to explore that. But in my head, I go, I know what it is. But I don't know if I want to go, like, I weigh how miserable do I want to be with the path, the journey to getting to, oh my God, I feel so much better.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, it had gotten to the point where I was so sick, walking from my front door to my mailbox, I would be out of breath. I mean, and in pain.
Right.
Now I have a park behind my house. I take long nature walks now, and I feel great now. And when I find that, like, every so often my son and I'll have a pizza, right? Like tonight we had pizza.
Right.
I'm going to pay for it tomorrow. My joints are going to hurt tomorrow.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so I know that, but I'm not going to allow myself to not indulge in things I'd still like. I'm just going to make sure I moderate them in a positive way.
So when I'm going to assume the life of a stuntman, fight director is a manly, alpha male, ego padding lifestyle.
It all depends on. It's interesting. It all depends on the set you're on, because directors, producers, some don't really understand that what you do is a skill. And now I'm involved in an organization called the International Order of the Sword and Pen, and every other year they have a big giant event in Canada where they bring fight directors and European martial artists from all over the world, Oriental, Asian martial artists all over the world. They come to one location, Banff, Canada, and for a week they have this workshop, right? All of the teachers at that workshop, the only pay that they get is their airfare and their food and lodging while they're there. They don't make any money for being there. The whole organization is designed around sharing knowledge, right? So it is very much a everybody just loves one another, and they just go out there and you learn all these fighting styles, and the guys who did fights for Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Highlander all teach there, and they're all good friends of mine, and it's a very different thing. But then you get on other sets, and the mentality is, we're stuntmen, and we're going to go out here, and those are the sets that there's a lot of blood on the sets. People will throw their bodies in ways that will hurt themselves,
Right.
and it's not necessary. It's not necessary to get the shot, especially now, because a lot of the stunts can be enhanced in CG. I mean, you still want the practicals, but the CG can make it so much better. It's so amazing.
I think and I know nothing about that world. I appreciate the value of it, because I know just from the fight background that I have, the amount of time and energy and effort it takes to be good at just doing the martial arts component to it, and understanding punch combinations and defensive, like, naturally, like, it's hard to choreograph. And I think one of the greatest guys that have ever taken to it, that's an actual actor, is probably Keanu Reeves.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
He's amazing with guns too. I mean, have you seen the videos on YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh my God, he is so good. He is so good, and so focused.
That's a tribute to what you do, though. That the reason why he does that is because he respects what you do. It's not because of anything other than a truly understanding of, I am the one that's getting all the glory for doing the Matrix moves and all that stuff, but there were stuntmen that were actually doing all those moves, and I'm the one getting the millions of dollars for it. And I think it's a really cool thing that he's one of those guys that pays homage to what you do, and really learns and understands the craft.
And there has been a push in Hollywood for decades to get stunts listed in the Oscars, because some of these stunts are death defying, literally death defying, and some people, you don't understand. It's like when you jump off a tower, and I going back, because that's the easiest way to describe something. You can do an end over, you can do a straight jump, you can do a rolling turn, there's all these multiple turns. But a lot of times the director will say, okay, I need you to come off this tower, do a rolling turn so that you can put your face towards the camera, and you need to stay solid enough in your fall so that we can morph the person's face on top of your face. Right. I mean, so that is a really finite skill to be able to do that. It's a big ask, right? People do it every day. You see all these things now, like in the Marvel movies, Black Widow. She runs up the guy, wraps herself around his legs, and then spins around his body and flips him, right? There's somebody really doing that, and we used to, I remember I was working in a live stunt show in Florida, and we had a guy, Paul Vieira, amazing martial artist, probably one of the best Kung Fu artists in the world. He was working with Miami Heat down there. He was an amazing guy. But Paul, if he was 5 foot tall, that was pushing it. I mean, he's a tiny guy. And I said to him, I was the fight director on this live stunt show. And I said, well, Paul, here's what I want. And I gave them all the choreography. And basically he had to sword fight a guy down a staircase, right? Then run down the staircase, do a handspring off of a guy's head with one hand, right? Then he would come down, plant his hand on the guy's head, go over top of him, hit the stage, spot the sword in the center of the stage, run to the center of the stage. The guy would do a sweep. He would do, it was called a butterfly kick, where you throw your legs way up in the air and your head's lower than but I wanted him to do the butterfly kick, not as an actual kick towards the target. I wanted him to do the butterfly kick as an avoid. So this guy's swinging for his feet, and he does the butterfly kick towards the audience. So the audience sees this giant fan of legs. He picks up the sword, coming out of the butterfly kick, goes right into finishes the sword fight. And eventually we have a guy come down. It was a man named Bill Huddle. He was playing Henry VIII. Now, Bill was a giant of a man. He was 6'8" and about 5'50",
Wow.
right? And he was in full Henry VIII garb, and he comes down and he he grabs one guy and he pushes him out of the way. He goes, and these two guys grab Paul and they throw Paul at Bill. No, right? And, and the two actors who are throwing him aren't really throwing him. They're acting like they're throwing him. Paul, because he was so skilled at his craft, he literally ran over out of that. It looked like he got picked up and thrown. It was him doing everything. Threw himself to Bill and had manipulated his energy so that he would actually start to slow down when he got to Bill. And so he touched Bill and just cushioned himself. So Bill felt nothing. And then he would fall down to the ground. And the first time we discussed that, he did the choreography, came down, did the handspring, did the butterfly kick, turned around, got thrown to Bill, all in one take. I mean, that's how intricate is that somebody can do it. You have to have that kind of dedication and skill. And he is that man. I give him that credit every day of my life because I think he's just an amazing individual. He also is a guy in his Kung Fu. He's so skilled at martial arts. He was talking one day about Qigong and the energy moving to his chi. And he had me grab his wrist and he was like, it looked like he just twisted his wrist, but he pushed me back a good 6-8 feet just by a slight motion he made. Amazing.
I'm fascinated by the whole concept of getting paid to fill in to be the star of the shows. The reason why they're the star of the show is because it's an action movie or whatever, and they're really not doing any of it. And the people that are doing it all don't really get the glory. And it's certainly one of those thankless professions.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that nobody cares about the fight without the story. And the acting part of the story is, and when you watch a film, the fights are 20 seconds, a minute. And it's a 2-hour movie. So the actor is doing quite a lot. And I give him, and most actors are very supportive of stunt people. They're very happy to have somebody else do it. Right.
Oh, sure.
Right. And, Burt Reynolds, when he was alive, he was the cheerleader for stuntmen all over the world. And he was really, in fact, he used to have his own stunt awards just because he wanted to make sure.
Hearing about that.
Yeah. And there was one of the movies, Hooper, that he did, they did a helicopter high fall, and it was Guinness Book of World Records highest high fall ever done. The guy literally jumped off the side of a helicopter into a pad. Yeah, incredible stuff.
So you go through this life. Now, how many years were you a stuntman? What was your total from the time you took that jump off the tower after 18 months in a hospital, being paralyzed to that?
Well, with the sword fighting show and everything, and the fight choreography and everything, I was doing stunts from probably my early 20s till probably up to about 49 or 50 years old. I mean, I done it for a long time. Now, granted, at the end of that, I was not doing the crazy stuff. Right. Right. I was doing the sword fighting show, which was mainly sword fights, whips, and jumping down staircases. But it wasn't like jumping off buildings anymore because the body just wasn't there for it any longer.
Is there a part of you? I mean, you're doing. I've done inspirational speaking for the last 5 years, and not nearly at the level you're doing your stuff, and not really my goal. It was to share my brother's story and stuff like that. But I know what I get from that. I've done the exciting stuff in my life. I've been shot at. I've been in shootings. I understand the coolness of being a cop and all that stuff. Is there a part of you that, like, have you found the same level of because of the technicality of what you were doing as a stuntman and as a fight coordinator and as the comedy sword shows, the choreograph, the skill, the precision that's required, have you found a way to capture some of that focus and attention into your speaking world?
It's very interesting you asked that question. I am just as fulfilled now as I was when I was in my 30s and 20s. And the reason being is because it's not that I physically don't do some of those things any longer, but now, like I went on and I studied neurolinguistics and hypnosis
Mhm.
and how the brain works and how to get people to achieve more. And I said earlier, I bring someone on stage and under 5 minutes time, I get them to crack that whip and take targets out of my hand. That's all done through using neurolinguistics and hypnosis and leveraging their fears and working around their fears. And to me, that is probably even more fascinating of work, because when you're doing it for yourself and you're doing the stunt, yeah, you've got a skill set and you can do that. But when you have a skill set that you can work with somebody else and you can get them to come away empowered, it's far better. The word action means to create motion, start momentum, or to do something. And the word hero means someone who achieves extraordinary result in service of others. And so I like to think of myself now in that way, because the work that I do now is much more impactful to others. Whereas before I was just entertaining them. Now I'm literally, they're leaving me empowered to do other things themselves. That person I bring to the stage is the most timid person in the audience. It was a life-changing moment for her, right? And the people who know her in the audience know that she's a timid person. So they're like, oh my God, I can't believe she did it. So they got a change out of it as well. And the content that I'm bringing with the 5 F's is the main crux of my main speech. And if they can take those 5 F's and manipulate and put them into their lives, it's going to create an amazing difference in their life, and it's going to empower them to reach any goal. I mean, the list of things that I said I did earlier was all because I took my own power.
That claiming of sovereignty, that claiming of power, of um, self-fulfillment
Mm-hmm.
is gigantic.
Yep.
And I think, I didn't know the definition of hero the way you said it. It's
Yeah.
funny. I used a very similar definition that I created. I do a lot of mentoring for kids 13 to 18. And my definition for leadership is essentially giving your time, energy, and effort to help someone else find success without wanting anything in return. So it's that servant component to it. And I like the definition that you provided for hero, because it's pretty much synonym for leader.
Right.
And I think, in a world full of sheep, it's very difficult to convince people they can be leaders.
Right.
And it's not until they claim that sovereignty, until they claim that self power, that self fulfillment, that self want, that self worth, that then the leadership, action hero, all those things, whatever it is you want to become, becomes your reality,
Right.
the
I
manifestation of those things.
completely agree. I completely agree. In fact, we touched on spirituality earlier, and I like Buddha, Krishna, Jesus. I think they're all so enlightened, and one of the things that you talk about, the sovereignty thing, Jesus said, you are the children of God. And, he was known as the son of God, right? Well, what's the difference? The only real difference is one of them claimed it,
Right.
right? That's the only difference, right? Because if you're one of the children of God, then you're either a son or a daughter of God, right? And if he's the son of God and you're the son of God, then, but the difference was he claimed that power. And, I think the same thing happened with Buddha, and I think it happened with Krishna and, Swami Narayan and blah, 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 all the way through history. I think there's many different ones. But I think that if you go back, like I did, I was very fortunate. Like I said, my mom gave me that leeway to go ahead and look, because I found they all were saying the same things. One of the most amazing books that I've ever read, and it's a big, thick 2-parter, is called The Second Coming of Christ by Yogananda. And it literally is Yogananda comparing what Jesus says in the New Testament to his Hindu faith. And the correlations are amazing, right? Of course, so when you're traveling through India, I spent a lot of time. I've been to 30 countries now. I traveled all over the world. I mean, I climbed Mount Sinai. I've been in Machu Picchu. I did all those things. But when I was in India, I kept hearing about the Prophet Isa all over the place. Prophet Isa. They had all these great stories about the Prophet Isa. Finally, I said, "Well, tell me more about this Prophet Isa." And they said, "Well, he he wasn't from here. He was from I forget what they called it back then, but what they called it when I was in India. But they said, but when he left here, he went back and he was crucified. And the more you dig in, you find out that Isa was Jesus in the time that he's not in the Bible, traveling through India, right?
Right.
So and then now suddenly there's the second coming of Christ. The book shows these correlations in the spirit. I think God is too big to be encompassed by one religion. And I think that there's kernels of truth in all of it, and you should find the kernels of truth and live by that code rather than by the codes of that don't match all the other ones.
I'm the son of a pastor. My stepfather's a Protestant pastor, and I am not anything other than a Christian.
Right.
I don't have a denomination. I have an individual relationship with God and
Right.
Jesus,
Which is the way it should be. As my mom said, spirituality is a personal journey. It's not, it's not something to follow. It's something to live.
And I'm not a follower anyways. It's
Right.
literally my least quality that I have is I don't follow anything. I have a very high threshold for people that I will follow. And it's simply because I've been around some amazing leaders and I've been around some really bad ones. And I've learned over the last 32 years in uniform service, the difference between the two. And I don't have a high trust zone either. So for me, it's, I prefer to be, not a lone wolf. I don't want to be alone, but I certainly have a small network of people in my squad. I call them my five, the people that I can call at any point in time that will show up with a tarp, a bucket of lye, and a shovel. And they won't ask any questions on why I need them. Those are my five. And I think every man on this planet needs to have five people in his life that he can call at any given time to respond for whatever the purpose is, and know that one of those five, if not all five, will show up. And I think that's the true, at the end of your life, I tell my kids this, I'm like, you're going to have people in your life for the moment they're supposed to be in your life. Not everybody's along for the entire journey.
Right.
There are people that are valuable parts of your life, but they're only there for a segment of time. And you can't mourn their loss if they're not in your life anymore, because their time within your journey is no longer needed.
Right. Right.
And I came to that conclusion because it was the only way I could understand why my brother died. It didn't make any sense. My brother was autistic. He had a severe stutter. He didn't have any of the typical 21 years of living that you and I may have had, where we had friends, we went to birthday parties, we went on a date, he never had any of those things. And for me, I was very, for 13 years, questioning why. And the only thing that made any sense to me after I really found God again and had my aha moment that got me out of that routine, was that God doesn't make mistakes. And God plans everything. That every part of your life was predetermined. How you got to the end is up to you. He gives you choices. He gives you opportunities. He gives you doors, as I call them, to go in and out of. But at the end, your journey is your journey. And my brother's journey was only supposed to be 21 years.
Right.
And the impact that his life was, I didn't know at the time, but I found out was magnificent. The people's lives that he touched. And after I wrote this book, people came out of the woodwork. I'm like, oh my God, you're Andy's brother? Oh my God, I loved him. And they named a gym after this camp that he worked at in the summer. They built a gymnasium and named it after him. Like, this is all from a kid that never got invited to a birthday party or got asked out to play or any of those things that we would think are the measure of your success at any given point in time in your life. If you're 8 and you're not getting invited to birthday parties, you suck, right? Like, so it's this whole measuring stick, right? But in reality, his measuring stick was not even measurable.
Right.
And when you realize that the person that's in your life for the period of time in your life, whether it's a relationship or not, I have a lot of kids that I mentor, and they're all, they break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, it's the end of the world. And I'm like, no, that was a gift. That person was brought into your life for the period of time they were in your life for you to experience certain parts of your life so that you can then use that knowledge to become better.
Right.
It's not a loss. You didn't lose anything. You gained something.
Right. You can find value in any situation. I find people like I always talk about going back to the present moment because there's only one conscious moment you live. You can only think, do, or say something right here, right now. Your
Right.
past is just uh, a storehouse of present moment memories. Your future is just a place where you set goals for your next present moment. But I see so many people who sit in this moment and they either pine for the past or they're focused on struggling to get to their future. And the way the brain works is right here, right now. You stack present moment successes, and that big giant thing is going to come to you because when you experience it, it's going to be around your present moment. And your past back here, your subconscious mind has two jobs. First job is to store those memories and give you that subconscious belief that you process from naturally. The other one is that when you focus on something in the present moment, your subconscious mind will show you what you're focusing on. So if, say, for instance, you like me, I have a thing for Jeeps. I love Jeeps. I see every Jeep on the road when I drive down the road because I'm consciously focused on Jeeps. And so Jeeps show up, right? Same thing with negative people. The reason they're negative all the time is because they're consciously focused there. So I see these people who get in these moments of this person was the love of my life. And I say, no, they were the love of that part of your life. But you're the author of your life. And, are you writing a comedy or a tragedy? Are you writing an adventure story? Or are you creating something great in your life? And, you don't have to struggle to get to that thing. It's coming to you just by making these small, successful present moments. So in the Bible, it says, be born again. I really, truly think that means make new present moments that replace the old ones and get rid of that subconscious belief from behind you. And, be born again, start something different, choose something new. I always tell people that today's choices are tomorrow's outcomes. And if they can stay with today's choices positively, then they'll have positive outcomes.
It's funny you just said what you're talking about with, being born again. Mm-hmm. And I've had a reoccurring dream since I was young that I died 53. I just turned 50 a couple weeks ago. And I never die. Like in my dreams, I don't see how I die. I know I'm dead in my dream. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anything of it, but I guess subconsciously it's helped me be more forceful in accomplishing things. Mm-hmm. Like, I have my bucket list that I want to get just in case 53 rolls around. That's it. I want to make sure that I all 53 years were valuable. But I was talking with a good buddy of mine who I'm actually launching a podcast network with, him and another guy. And he's very enlightened, very much into the energy and 5D and just understanding the Great Awakening and all that kind of stuff. And just a really beautiful person and a fantastic resource for sometimes some clarity. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned this to him and he goes, have you ever thought about the fact that maybe it's just a rebirth? And I'm like, how so? He goes, maybe at 53, the life you're living ends and the new life begins.
Right.
In a, not necessarily a terminal way, but in a whether it's a consciousness way or in a mindset shift or whatever the rebirth is, that maybe that's what I'm like, what? That makes way more sense to me.
Right.
Because I've never seen my death. So
right. I used to speak at metaphysical centers all over the world. I spoke at a lot of the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment groups and all that. And I used to do this thing where in the speech, but it was before 2012, I'd say, do you guys want to know what's going to happen in 2012? And they all get quiet and they lean in. I go, the Mayan calendar is going to end. But guess what? Last December, my other calendar ended. We're still here.
Right.
It's like, choices. I believe there's choices. I believe that we have the ability to live our life the way we want to. I think we disagree in one area. I don't believe that you're destined. I don't believe there's a fate. I believe that we are, if nothing is impossible, then there can't be destiny or fate. And the Bible says nothing is impossible. So that's where I'm leading my life. Right.
No, I'm with you. I believe God has a plan, whether or not, I don't know if it's a definitive ending, but I believe there's a plan. He put us here for a reason. We were created in his own image for a reason. And I believe that we get to choose whether or not we achieve that.
Do you want to hear a theory?
Yeah.
Okay, get this. The Apostle John says God is love, right? in Sufism, they believe that God is on one side of a veil and we're on the other side of the veil. And our job is to, quote unquote, struggle against the veil. Right. And I believe the veil is our own personal fear. And so I really truly believe that we are here to be able to experience God fully, because you can't experience anything without knowing the polar opposite, because you have nothing to measure against, right? You have to have a baseline. And so we are here, and it's like we are here. Imagine we're in this pure energy of God's image, but we have a fog machine in our hand on the dial. We can crank the fear up and really not see God, or we can crank the fear way down and really see and feel, experience that loving experience. And so, Buddha said that the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. And so that veil being fear, and him saying that, I really believe that there's a correlation of we're here to experience our source fully through our own living life with fear and working through our fears. That's what I believe.
That's actually a really astute and logical. Like, to me, like, lots of things have to have logic to me. Like, there has to be some level of processing that goes, yeah, I can see where that makes sense. And that makes actually a lot of sense, because it's a very, people want to make the world and life and everything so fucking difficult. Right. We add so many layers to something that's pretty, A plus B equals C. I mean, I don't think it's that difficult. Be a good person, live in love, do your very best, work hard, like all those simple things that we're supposed to be doing that we just make so difficult.
Right. When I delved really deep into it, in Buddhism, they always say life is about struggle. But when you go back to the original text, they aren't in English. And the word for struggle was dukkha. And dukkha, when you translate it, has three very distinct definitions. The first one is pain or struggle. The second one is habitual thought. And the third one is personal limitations, right? So if you take all three of those definitions and you combine them, it is struggling through personal limitations with habitual responses. So to me, it's like we have these habitual responses from our subconscious mind. We struggle with those habitual responses, right? And we experience that pain. So I really think it's the actual quote is more clear than what modern language has been allowed to be.
Right.
And I think it's fascinating. There's so many fascinating things in the old text that are just, I think, misinterpreted in a lot of ways.
If you just take, my same friend that I was telling you about that said maybe it's a rebirth of my life at 53. He's all into, how words are created, like heaven, like all the different ways that if you break them apart, what each part of those words mean. And I'm not nearly as well versed in that as he is, but it's fascinating when, I'm trying to think of the ones, like there's so many words that now when you break them apart, you're like, oh shit, like 2020 was like when you started looking at words and you start breaking them, you're like, oh my God, I see what's happening here.
Right. Well, if you look at let's just some biblical stuff. So in the original translation of the word hell, the word was Gehenna. And during that historical time in Jerusalem, on the outskirts of the town was the burning trash dump, where you would go burn your city dump, right, stuff. And the area where that trash dump was Gehenna. And so you would burn in Gehenna, quite literally, right?
Right.
Our modern interpretation of hell does not happen until the 1300s, when Dante writes the Inferno. The whole devil, all that stuff is not in the Bible, right? Here's the other one that gets me. The rapture is not in the Bible. People get all into the rapture and they're thinking about the rapture. The rapture didn't exist until 1830, when a Protestant minister created it.
Mm-hmm.
And which is really interesting, but he was interpreting the word that was, the line was, he will gather them up. And then he went into prayer and came out with this whole story about what the rapture was, and then put it into doctrine. But it didn't exist until 1830s, right? the majority of Christianity changed in 325 when Constantine did the Nicene Council. Constantine came to that council dressed as the pagan sun god and then didn't get baptized till his deathbed. So he wanted to live the life of a pagan and dance in his toga and then go to a Christian heaven. Right. So it's a very, you go back into the history, there's so many fascinating things. But I think Jesus had it right. And I think, Krishna had it right and Buddha had it right. I think they were just enlightened beings who really understood the bigger picture. And they were just trying to tell us how to do it, how to live it.
Who many of the populace doubted.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at today, right? If 2020, 21 shows anything, it's this polar separation between beliefs, and then this doubting, conspiracy theory, heretic aspersions on anybody who may have an enlightened thought.
Right.
They're chastised and cast aside and told that they're evil and wrong, and cancel culture, all that other stuff that follows. And we're in sort of this, all the major, if you look, and we were just talking historically, all of the major Christian events over the last 2,000 plus years, there were these seminal moments where people who were enlightened were persecuted, and but then through that came revelation and enlightenment and acceptance. And I think we're in a phase now in our world, the history of our world, where some amazing enlightenment is coming.
I agree with you. And there's a famous story from the Gnostic texts about the Apostle John. He's the only one who survived to old age.
Yep.
He died in Ephesus, Turkey. And it's a great story. He's there in the room with all the people, and they're like, John, would you speak? You were the last one who walked with Jesus. Would you tell us your story? And John very old man would get up and slowly dodder to the front of the room, and he'd get up there and he'd get all prepared, and he'd go, love one another. And then he'd turn and he'd dodder back to his chair, and they'd say, no, tell us more. He says, I can't tell you more until you learn this. Right. And that's, I think, where we are right now. We have to learn to love one another. When I was in Egypt, I was treated like a prince. I was there for a month, just traveled all over Egypt. I was treated like a prince wherever I went. Everybody treated me really, really well. And, I've never made more friends in my life. And I went to Mount Sinai and I climbed Mount Sinai, and I ended up meeting this manager at the hotel and got into a great conversation with him. That night at dinner, he made me a special dinner because we became friends. I started climbing that mountain at 1 o'clock in the morning. 2:30 in the morning, I heard my name called. John, in the darkness on the side of Mount Sinai. John. I'm like, whoa, right? And it was the manager coming up. Yeah. I was like, right, okay. It wasn't God, though. It was the manager running up the mountain an hour and a half to give me his coat because he thought it was going to be cold. The next day, I ran into another American in St. Catherine's Monastery at the base. He says, are you American? I said, yeah. He says, have you been having problems since you've been here? I said, no, everybody's treating me like a prince. He says, everywhere I go, people want to fight me. 5 minutes later, I wanted to kick the guy's ass because he was an absolute jackass. We have to put out that love first. We have to put out that energy first. And the people who get so stressed about the things that other people are doing are living their life and not their own. You have to live that loving energy and that positive energy to have it be in your world. And so don't focus on what they do. Focus on what you do.
That's a great way to end the show.
I saw you looking at the clock. I was like, oh, yeah, we have gone long, haven't we?
No, but this is typically my shows are hour and 20 minutes. Usually we end up, because what happens is, because this is such a non-planned event, there's just more and more things to talk about. As you're talking, I'm talking, shit just comes up. And I love that.
Yeah.
That's why I love doing my show.
It's a great show. I love it. Thank you. Thanks for going into some topics that I don't normally get to go into, because that whole spirituality bent is really something I'm really deeply into personally. And I don't get to talk about it very often.
And it's just, I felt something when in the very beginning, and, because I truly believe that there has to be a God, whatever that God is to that person, that would help someone overcome what you overcame, and to give you that confidence and that courage and that perseverance. So I think I just sort of sensed that in the very beginning, that there was some spirituality component to it. And I'm a very spiritual guy. And even though I touch like a sailor, and even though I was a soldier,
so did my grandmother, so it's okay.
It's I do believe that we're all meant to be better,
I
and
agree.
that
I
our
completely agree.
potential is limitless if we simply just take away all of the external, intentionally divisive noise, and just simply
Right.
focus on how can I become a better person so I can help someone else.
And
And
to simplify that, just be love.
yeah,
And God is love. So that's how you crack the veil and get to the other side.
well, I love it. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere. Where can people
All right.
find you? First of all, what's
Oh,
your website? And
corporateactionhero.com. You can find LinkedIn, Facebook is all there. Also, I want to give your audience a free gift. You'll have to put it in your show notes because it's a really stupid long link. But what it is, it's the 5F workbook. They can go through their own process of the 5Fs. Now, I want to say this. It's a free gift, which means that website has nothing, doesn't sell anything, and it does not even take your email address. It's about bringing value to you, not taking value from you. So it's a free gift, and it's like the free gift page. It's what it's called, but you won't find it if you go to the website. You have to get it from the link.
do me a favor, email me that after we're done this.
If
Make sure that
you
goes
just go rid of
into
my Podmatch profile is right there.
perfect. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk offline. Everybody, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was enlightening for me. I think John's story is phenomenal. I think the things he's overcome and accomplished in his life as a result of his belief in himself and his willingness to go places where maybe others wouldn't, and not to be limited by other people's beliefs or expectations of him, is something to be inspired by. Once again, everybody, you can find Two Dates in a Dash anywhere where you listen to audio podcasts. You can go to mattcubbler.com to learn more about me, get a copy of the book, A Brother's Love, a Memoir, and also my YouTube page, Matt Cubbler. So thank you, everybody. God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.